Hi, I'm Edgar.
And I'm Paul,
and welcome back to the brush,
the monthly podcast where we talk about model making and model painting.
As we all want to do, we have put 10 of the images most relevant to the podcast episode today on our Instagram. There is a link in the description if you'd like to click that to have a closer look and follow along as we talk. They are never in the correct order, as someone has pointed out. And that is correct. They are not in order. But they are just an image that you can zoom in on, so it's easier to see what we're talking about.
For today's topics, we wanted to talk about basing, in particular rims.
The cult of the black base rim. We will get to that.
We obviously, as always, have little bits and bobs we've been working on to show and tell.
Yep, I've got a small selection of models in front of me. And as an aside, something we've talked about in previous episodes, model scales for kit bashing and proxying stuff in war games. That's something that I've seen that question asked a bunch, and so I want to kind of explain why it's such a difficult thing. And so that will be one of our topics today as well. But first, we have a message, if I grab my rosette, from the Ordo Redactus.
All hail the Ordo Redactus.
All hail the Ordo Redactus. Unfortunately, our message from the Ordo Redactus this month was garbled by the transmission from one Estra telepath to another. And so we actually only have some of the information and not all of it. But I will go through a few of the points. We do know that there was an awful lot mentioned about our previous episode, starting with when I said something along the lines of we're getting good at the whole not lying thing. Well, Foxy Mitz, our chief researcher for the Ordo Redactus, took that personally. And between the two of them, that being Foxy Mitz and Engelcat, they've done a job of picking out every possible thing that could be said against us. Mostly me. In fact, I think solely me. It's still only me that they just please just take something off of Paul next time. However, to read off some of the corrections, the Fallout board is a square yard, whereas you were saying it was 1 meter 20. So actually, that is a correction from you. Haha.
You're going to say,
for you.
They're all corrections for me, he says. Proceeds to the first one, correction for me.
I mean, I wasn't reading it when I said that. I was just complaining. Complaints don't have to be, real. There's also, I was mentioning the American term stroller. And so apparently prams and strollers are actually different things. Both ways of moving babies from one place to another, but specific.
Is that like a pushchair?
Specific shapes. I think one's like a cot with wheels and one's... And this is now also wrong. So there's going to be further... It's just going to be baby carriages in the Ordo Redactus for the next 6 months. The character from the Call of Cthulhu game that you married... Paul, is called Ash.
Okay.
Ash is the goat person.
My goat husband.
And Foxy Mitz suggests looking for a satyr rather than a beast man, because you get slightly less demonic models potentially.
I have found one to put now.
Excellent. So we will expect Rhea and Ash on a big scenic base together.
I just need to scale it because it's taller than her, and I imagine them being about the same height. So.
A little bit difference in height shouldn't be too much. Either bigger or smaller.
This is way bigger. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
It'd be like putting them like that next to each other. So like considerably.
Well, as we will mention later in the podcast, scaling is a difficult thing. Particularly on scaling, there's another point of the Ordo Redactus that there are two different scales of Titanicus. Rather than Epic being one scale and Titanicus being another, one of the Titanicus scales is the same as Epic, and then there was another Titanicus that was a different scale, just to make things more confusing, I think. That's all that's for, just to make things harder.
One of them's 6mm, I believe.
Epic, and one of them is 6mm, and the other is 8mm.
Sounds like an excuse to sell more models to me.
Probably, given Games Workshop's modus operandi, I think that's probable. Also on the subject of scale, Foxymits has looked up the Kings of War Armada. These ships that I've been obsessing about for the last few weeks / months. On the website, they are listed as being between 1 to 700 to 1 to 800 scale, but specifying that they are not true scale, so they are heroic scale, which means they are roughly 2mm heroic scale ish. Kind of at a push, that's kind of where you'd put it. And finally, green is not a primary color. Well, actually.
Oh, your webcam did that thing where it flashed green then. That was perfect.
Yeah, thankfully, my webcam view is not the view I'll be using for this episode, hopefully. I'll be using my phone view. Now I have to edit that. That's annoying. Thanks for that. So, green is not a primary colour, as my webcam flashes green. Appropriate. But it is. Green is a primary colour. Because paints and light behave differently from each other and is very annoying and confusing.
I don't think they are. I think they're red, yellow, blue.
Would you like to look that up?
Yes.
Go on, look it up. We'll do a live Order Redactus.
Being live while we pre-record it. Yeah, primary colours of light indeed. Green.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
We all stand corrected.
Is that red, blue and green?
Red, blue, green, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not yellow. I said red, yellow and green. It's red, blue and green. So
We're
yellow is not the primary
in ourselves.
So yeah, live Order Redactus. Let's get all this out of the way. We're done with the Order Redactus. I'll put the rosette away. That's enough. All of the rest of it can be washed away because it was lost in the Astra Telepath transmission. Basically a long conversation on Discord that I'm not going back to dismantle. And let's instead talk about some of the models that we have made or painted in the last month. And Paul, would you like to begin?
I've only really been working on one of them. So obviously
that's a short list.
It is a short list. I've been printing a lot of things, but I can't say I've painted a lot other than bits of furniture to go in my previously shown Novak.
I would say that all counts. Anything that you've made.
I've been playing the Fallout Wasteland Warfare game minis. I've been concentrating on recently, and one of the bigger minis they do is Liberty Prime. Now this
Massive
model
robot.
is, when I looked today, it was £90 for this resin model. I was looking at my wife, because my wife has the Fallout loot crate, and one of the models in that was a model of Liberty Prime, and it turns out that the height of this model is almost identical to the official resin model.
How convenient.
So I hit up the Facebook group and was just asking around, and some of the members, one of the member in particular, had both. So he sent me photos over. So here is the big boy. So this was, when it came with the loot crate, he was silver with, I would say, a heavy dry brush of like a bronzy colour. And other than the bombs, that was the only colour on the entire model. So I've added all this blue. I redid the red because it didn't quite match the game. So the base I've made myself. We'll cover that in a minute when we talk about basing in particular. But
several minutes.
It's the correct size and sort of matches the model. Now, from my point of view, I don't know about you this Ed. I struggled with this one because there's no colour. So I went and looked at the model in the game, and there's two different alliterations based on whether it's the Fallout 3 or Fallout 4 one. The model is the Fallout 4 one, so I sort of went as close to that as I could. These blue things sort of light up. Those weren't blue on this, and obviously the bombs, other than these red bits up here which weren't painted correctly, so I've corrected that. There's no colour on this model, and it is boring.
I'm trying to think of if I've actually had a model that isn't a vehicle that I've had that problem with. I guess it's mainly vehicles from my point of view. A lot of my Orc, like my trucks, my bikes, my killer cans, I used to paint them with a mix of brown, red, and a metallic color, like silver, to make a rusty metallic that I would just paint smoothly over the entire thing. And by smoothly, I of course mean not thinned and massively lumpy and horrible, as was the tradition at the time.
Well, yeah, I mean, I did a lot of rust on the top down, and then on the shoulder, on this one, obviously, because his arm's upside down, I envisioned that he would be standing outside with both arms by his side, so the rust's on the bottom. Yeah. But yeah, it was a struggle because I'm used to using a lot of colours, and I did some of these wires in like red and yellow, and some in blue, just to add something to it. But I really struggled with expressing what I wanted to show using so few colours.
It's certainly very difficult to paint with a monochromatic or limited colour selection. Yeah. It can be done, and it's been done extremely well.
Yeah,
but it requires a certain frame of mind. It requires not necessarily particular skills, although kind of what I'm talking about maybe is a particular skill, to be able to paint in the lighting strong enough that the lighting is vibrant where the color isn't, because it's a single or very limited muted tones. Yeah. That's kind of also the non-metallic metal method. Is you have very bright highlights and very dark shadows, and sometimes very, very close together with very smooth transitions, sometimes very, very small smooth transitions. So I guess that's a related subject, isn't it?
Maybe something for next month then.
Maybe something that we can look at. I have done non-metallic metal in the past.
We could do a bit of a challenge. We could perhaps paint something up.
In non-metallic metal. All right. Challenge accepted. Next month, we will open with a non-metallic metal from the two of us.
Okay, so there you go. Here's mine. This is my kitchen. It looks terrible.
I can also show off some of the models that I've painted this month. Some of these models have been featured in videos, so I will not spend too long on them.
Videos over on Ed's individual channel.
Yes, on
link in the description.
Edscar. I will particularly mention Mad Donna Ulantai. This is a model that I have wanted for probably 20 years, and I recently found one for a reasonable price. Firstly, I found one available, which is not always the case, as this is a fairly rare model, but I managed to pick it up for a good price as well.
Was it Facebook Marketplace? I can't remember.
Yes, it was just a snag off of Facebook Marketplace. It's odd because the person who sold it is a trader of Warhammer stuff, and so they should probably know the value of this, and they sold it for about a quarter of what it sells for on eBay.
We thought it was a recast until you got it, and I was like, no, it's definitely real.
I wasn't really worried about it being a recast because the pictures were in a packet, and like new in packet with all of the metal on show. So, yeah. Anyway, specifically with this model, I wanted to go for the painting, like not leaving a model on a plinth on your pile of shame. To like, because I almost fell into the trap of doing that, because this is a model I've wanted for so long, and I finally got it, and then I put it on a base, primed it, and I left it on a shelf for several months, thinking, no, I'm going to improve my skills and then I'll paint it, which is a dangerous thing, and a lot of people get caught in that trap. And so I wanted to be very deliberate about, this is my favourite model on my pile of on my pile of opportunity, my pile of shame. I'm going to paint it now with my skill level now. I'm going to go slow. I'm going to go careful. I'm going to paint it as best as I can. And I think I achieved that. It does look pretty cool. But I'm not going to leave it and like let it gather dust for months and months and months. That message did ring true for a few people. And I have had 3 people respond with models that they were going to paint. I've got one picture, but I'll mention the other 2 first. One of them is, they didn't want their picture shown on the podcast. That's fine. Another person, their image is, shall we say, not appropriate for our podcast.
Oh, one of those models.
It's not one of those models, but it's a very gory, bloated brood mother with 1,000 breasts sort of thing.
Okay.
It was well painted, and it was taken off of the top of their pile of shame, so kind of fits that description. Yeah, and finally, we have this model, which is a Chaos Space Marine thyroid, Tyrannid. It's probably a Tyrannid from the user Hagrid. Probably not that Hagrid, but
probably struggled to paint with their big giant hands.
Yes. But
I always love the little Nurgle friends they have with them. They're so cute.
Yeah, that's a really cool model. So thank you to Hagrid for letting me use that image, and also like you're welcome for me kind of kicking you to get that thing painted.
I love the base on that. It's like a Marsy kind of sandy. I don't know. I like that.
Yeah, it's nice and simple. It's not like a 10 hours have gone into that base, but it looks just right, just spot on. Like I like chef's kiss.
I like that kind of, all of my 40k terrain, all of it I tend to do sort of, I like the aesthetic of Mars. I like the Mechanicus terrain and kind of rusty, yeah.
As we'll discuss when we talk about basing, I've got a bad habit of not doing any basing, or doing some very simple basing, and this next model has exactly that problem. This is a model I made of spare parts. I have many arms that I want to use up as an orc. With many model kits, you get arm options, and so once you build all the models, you have all of the spare arms left over, and sometimes spare heads. And so I've got a lizard man head on this particular model, and I've used the arms of an orc. And I'm pretty sure the gun is from an action man, or an action figure of some description.
So you think if you'd have painted him green, you could have had him fighting Kirk?
Given that they were orc arms, I wanted to paint it not green.
Yeah.
Just for variety. I haven't painted a blue skin tone. Another reason why I painted it blue is because I really wanted to paint a blue skin tone. I think I could have pushed the highlights a little more, but I think it looks okay as is. But yeah, I've got loads of spare arms, and so I went around and found some body to 3D print so that I could just print out a bunch of bodies, put all of the heads and arms on, and have complete models. And so I ended up with that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Another one that made it to a video is some of my Tanith First and Only models. Particularly this one, because I made the cloak out of milliput, and I showed a technique for how to kind of cheat with sculpting, or like get halfway to a sculpted finished product really easily, so that you only have to do the finishing steps. I of course then did the finishing steps terribly, as you'll see from the video. I used a cocktail stick to smooth the milliput down.
Texture,
a cocktail stick is not smooth to begin with, so it's a terrible tool for that job. I also have another Tanith First and Only, this time with a flamer. Just another one to my ever-growing army of Tanith. I didn't want an army of Tanith First and Only. I just wanted to paint the 6 models that I had. I now have 12. So
it's because people keep pointing out the characters that you've forgot, and then you have to go back and make a model for it.
Yes, well, for those who know about the Tanith First and Only, I'm working on Bragg. next. I'm also working on an autocannon team and some other things. I've got another 20 models for the Tanith on the way, and I'll probably end up with more after that as well. Another one from a video is the Gur Panther. This is the last of the ships I'll be painting from the Armada starter set. And also, if you notice, it has a resin, blue resin base. And that is partly why I want to discuss resin bases. But this particular model has made it to 2 videos this month from me. One for painting the actual model and one for doing the resin bases. And then also, from that same video, the resin basing video, is...
I love this. It's so cool.
Is my Kraken. And I think... I agree. I really like this model. I love how this has come out. Honestly, I didn't put a lot of effort into it. And it kind of shows. There's a lot of mistakes and like there's imperfections. But it does look really cool, just as it is.
It looks brilliant. I love the purple. It's brilliant. I really like it. The only thing I'd change is I'd want to give it a round base. I think that's just, I don't like square bases.
All of the rules for Armada has round bases. Has square or rectangle bases. So, I think I would also probably prefer it on a round base. We're talking about bases too much. I think we just smoothly transition into talking about bases.
Into base as well. Okay.
Yeah, I agree with you. To us. I agree with you when you say round bases, because a round base does look nicer, and I'm not sure
a nice
why.
hex.
Hex base. No. Yeah. Honestly, I don't think I have any models with a hex base.
The Kelpian model that you kit bash, that came with a hex base,
Kelpian, I rebased him onto a round base. So I don't actually have a model on a hexagonal base, because that one's on a round base. For our challenge that we're doing, I'll put my non-metallic metal model onto that hexagonal base, and we'll see how it looks.
I have absolutely no idea how I'm going to do this non-metallic metal, so it's going to be interesting.
I've followed a bit of non-metallic metal stuff. It's not terribly difficult, but it is something you have to deliberately think about.
Going back to my old chum here,
a much larger model on a round base.
So the base for this model is 175mm. It's big. It just about fits on it, because obviously I matched it to the one I was trying to emulate.
If it wasn't going to fit, would you have cut maybe a knee or maybe a hip to make it fit on the base?
It's done in such a way that you wouldn't be able to pivot it very well. You'd have to perhaps hacksaw up there. I don't know.
Yeah, that's probably how I.
It's already broke. The cat, when we first got him, so the loot crate, it come as like a series. So like you'd get the body and then you get a leg, like over weeks or whatever. And basically, while he was like semi-built, the cats knocked him over and broke his leg. So it's actually held together with glue anyway.
Fair enough. See, you call it broken, I call it free conversion.
Yeah. Well, the problem I had with this was, I don't know what it's made of, but it would not glue with anything. It was it was difficult.
A lot of that.
In the end, I had to super glue it, and then put some UV curing resin around it, and then hold it for like 40 minutes. So I just sat here at this desk holding it.
Just to get it to stick.
Yeah, it's all right. I mean, it's glued to this base now, so it's not going anywhere.
Is it a slightly rubbery plastic?
Yes, yeah.
It's probably vinyl. Yeah. Probably. There are some other materials it might be, but polyurethane or a vinyl, most likely vinyl.
So the base, I initially 3D printed the disc, 175mm by, I want to say 3mm deep. I can't remember.
3mm's not a lot. That's probably why you had the problems that you're about to discuss.
Yeah.
Continue.
Where are my calipers? I can caliper it in a minute. So I've got that, and then underneath I've got a wooden one that's also 3mm. if that's 3mm, I can't remember. Anyway, so this is a car bumper filler. So the rocket...
For your texture paint. Texture paste.
Yes, yeah. So the original had the same theme. It was a destroyed Red Rocket petrol station. It had this. It had a fridge, like a Nuka-Cola fridge, and like a petrol pump thing. Now, I own the 3D print file. Well, I own a license to the 3D print files for the Red Rocket petrol station in its entirety. So all I did was I took this rocket model, cut it in half in the computer, so it's only like that half, and then printed that half, snapped this bit back here off. So it looks like, oh, it's broken up. And then this is part of the sign for the Red Rocket, which I just cut apart in the computer.
Split the model and print out a little bit. Yeah,
and then that there's a real piece of stone that I found on my drive.
Real stone. You're not
that
a proper. It's one of those.
Which I then painted.
You're not a proper modeler until you've painted a stone to look like stone.
So as Ed alluded, so my initial when I woke up in my initially official model basing, when I woke up in the morning, this had warped.
Yeah, did you use PVA glue? No, you said you used filler.
That's filler to make the surface,
which has slightly shrunk and it's peeled the whole thing up.
Yeah. So the wood on the bottom, I basically put super glue around the outside and PVA in the middle, and then used 2 G clamps to hold it down while it's set. That's warped a little bit, but
yeah, I'm not surprised that also
considerably
warped.
better better than it was. And then I glued him onto this base last night for filming today, basically. So
yeah, so a nice big model.
Yeah. So.
On the subject of a nice big model that takes a lot of effort to do, we mentioned in episode, I think it was episode 1. Was it episode 1 or episode 2? Very early on in the podcast, we mentioned the BackToTheBrush Stomper, which Paul bought and I'm building, and I have actually made some progress. Like every now and again, I'll do a little bit, but I've kind of made some big steps in the last month. So I've got all of the mold lines done. I've done a lot of gap filling. I've primed it, and I've actually started to paint it now.
Yay!
I made the decision that if I was to wait until I had all of the conversion done, like I want to put a chest burster cannon, I want to do like a shoulder gun and some gantry work on the back, some other things as well. If I wait until all that's done, it's going to be forever until I ever get it painted. So what I can do instead is like prep the model, paint it, so that the base model is good to go. Done. And it's a usable model. But then I can come back and do like one of those extra conversions as a standalone conversion to it, which means that I can kind of just take little bite-size bites out of the project. Just little nibbles rather than having to do it all at once, which would be more difficult.
Well, Rome wasn't built in a day.
Rome wasn't built in a day, no. For the basing subject, given that we are supposed to be talking about that, I will mention that while my unpainted models I like to refer to as my pile of opportunity, because, hey, these are all the models I have. I can paint any one of them. That's great. There's a wonderful opportunity. It's not a pile of shame because there's nothing negative about having models to paint. But I have a second pile that is a pile of shame. And it is all of the models that I have painted the model of and have done nothing with the base. And I managed to cut that down quite a bit this week, particularly with my Frostgrave Knolls that I painted. And I've done these with some reeds, or tall grass, I think is probably the best way to describe it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, how do you think that told? I think I already told you how the grass was done.
I think you sent me a photo of it last week, and I suggested that it might be a broom brush because it looks like broom brush. But
yes, it's a boot polish brush.
Okay. I was thinking like a big yard brush.
Yeah. I went through my old boot polish kit, and I realised I've got too much stuff in there. I've got too many brushes. I was about to throw. I threw a whole bunch of the mouldy stuff away, but all the good stuff I've kept because I need to polish my boots occasionally. But I had an extra couple of brushes, and then I noticed these models sitting on the shelf with no base, with nothing done to the bases, and I thought I could combine these two issues to fix both of them. It's extremely difficult to lay grass, scale grass, and there's all sorts of things like static grass applicators and the shuffle pot. I guess that's also static in a way. With these, I didn't have any of that. I didn't have the right type of static applicator to put this type of hair down as grass. And so what I did is I cut off some of the hairs, held them in my finger so there were a bunch of them together, dropped a spot of super glue on the base, and jabbed it in. And then I did that 10 or 15 times on every single base. Okay, 5 to 15 times, because some of them have less.
Fun times.
And it sort of, it took a long time. And it sort of doesn't look consistent. And some of the models do look better than others.
It's representing like a bog. It's not going to be consistent, is it?
Yeah, I don't mind it being too patchy. So long as it sells the effect, and I think it just about sells the effect. That's all I really need. To cover up the super glue at the bottom, that's then a simple custom texture paste. Sand and baking powder together to make different sizes of grain, but then PVA glue and just some black paint. And poured over the base until it drips off. Hold it over the pot, drip it all off, wipe the rim, and it's done.
I think this one was my sister sent me this from IKEA. It's like a slightly thicker than sand, so I've not played with it yet. DYFT, Dwift. Risk of colour rub off. That's all it says. Just some IKEA.
I have no idea what that is. Do you know what it's used for?
Little plant pot things, like when you put fake plants and you put it on the surface. It's bigger than sand.
Interesting. So that's actually a useful thing to have. I'm slowly collecting a lot of different sizes of granules, and I don't want to get to the point where I start sieving things to separate them more specifically. But having the different sizes of granules means you can create different effects. And so having something that's larger, having something that's smaller, that means you just keep the options open. The old classic of putting standard sand onto a mini base to pretend to be grass or to pretend to be sand. It doesn't look like grass and it doesn't look like sand. It does, however, look like gravel. And so I use sand to represent gravel.
Yeah, I would just
quite a lot.
I mean, even with sharp sand, which is the finest, I think you can probably commonly get, it's still...
Yeah, the granules are too big to be scale sand. But mixing the different sizes of things, again, like I did with my little bog here, can be useful.
Yeah, so the Armageddon Dust, the official Games Workshop basing stuff, came in when I first started, when I returned to the painting hobby.
When you got back to the brush, perchance.
It was in the box of, I think it was like 12 different things.
Yeah. It starts yeah.
Our friend Manchester Nerfer has since then given me... What did he give me? Give me this. I think it was this one. This Sterling Mud. It's only a recent acquire. I quite like that one. It's on this one.
So does that have a mix of sizes? Can you tell?
Yes, so there's different sizes of grain in that.
I'm
I
not
quite like
surprised
that one.
at that.
Astro Granite. But to be fair, I can't really see a great deal of difference between that one and the Armageddon one.
I mean, there doesn't need to be much difference. It's just, hey, there's a new product, you have to buy it.
Yeah, buy.
I say there's another kitchen supply that makes for good basing that gives a different texture, and that's
Salt?
flour. Particularly flour, because it absorbs the water, whereas like sand and baking powder sort of don't. Well, I guess baking powder does, but not as much as flour does, and so you can get more slushy, muddy textures out of that.
Clumpy.
Yeah. And again, mixing flour and sand or mixing flour and baking powder to get the different sizes of grain, just for different effects.
And of course, my favourite, cat litter.
And of course, used cat litter.
Not used. Painted never stick to it.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, that I've used that a few times.
I need to replenish my supply of rocks. Every time we go shopping, I'm looking around for rocks, and my sister gets annoyed with me. She's like, "Why didn't you just buy a bag of rocks from?"
Because they're expensive. It's silly.
Yeah, I know.
Particularly if you go to like model suppliers, and
I wouldn't buy it from model suppliers. I would buy it from like driveway gravel.
Hardware shop. But it was like
B&Q and get the smallest size of rock.
Like I want some sharp sand, but I want like that much. I want a little tub of sharp sand like that. I don't want to buy 2.5
kilos.
Yeah.
How many models would it take to use 5 kilograms of sand?
Yeah, it'd take forever. Well, it'd last a lifetime, wouldn't it? Or in my case, the cats would use it as a toilet before I'd used it all.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe not. I wonder if someone can weigh some sand, put sand on a model, and then weigh how much sand is left.
I'll work out how much you've used.
And you work out how. Maybe do 10 models. Get a running average.
I mean, the only one I've got up here that's got like sand on, but I mean it's only a thin amount on the bottom. We've showed this model before.
We have.
So if you want to look at the close-up photo, it'll be in one of our previous Instagram posts rather than posting it again. I still haven't done anything with it.
You've got to break that. You've got to break that.
I don't want to break it.
What's it called on a wind thing like that? What are each one of the, I guess, blades?
I actually don't know what these are for in real life. Like, what does it do? In real life, is it a water pump? What?
Is there any mechanism connected to it?
On this particular model, no. But
so it would be for gauging wind direction and wind speed.
It seems like an awfully large thing to build just to see.
There may be other things. All of the farmers in the audience can post in the comment section about all of the different things you can use that kind of contraption for.
Big weather
a windmill that's not connected to any mechanism.
I'm imagining that probably they are in real life. It's just that model hasn't got it.
Yeah, that's kind of my suspicion as well. For power generation.
While we're talking about bases, let's move on to the rims.
Base rims.
Mm-hmm.
Base rims. There is a massive cult following in the mini painting community of painting the base rims black, but also to force everyone else to paint the base rims black with no possible substitutes and no other colours permitted.
I think it's quite interesting because when I started painting again, initially I picked up some Space Marines from Ed, and I bought a couple second hand from eBay and Facebook and that kind of thing. I started just carrying on the base. So if I pick up like this Space Marine I've got here, the texture, I just did it all the way down the side. So All
Have
of
you
my
have you put texture paint on the base rim, or have you just
Yeah.
used the
Yeah.
base color? Interesting. Yeah.
So all of my Space Marine models, whatever I did on the base, just carries on. Oh, that's got a big cat hair on it. Isn't that lovely? It carries on round.
I actually quite like that.
When I started doing the Sisters of Battle models, they're all in the display case above me. I did gold rims.
I have to say that the gold base rims for the Sisters of Battle looks really good.
I quite like that. But with the Fallout ones, I must admit I've gone down just using black.
Is
for
there
the rims.
a deliberate decision that you've made to do that? Or
No,
is
I
it
think
just that you
all
think
of the
that it looks
bases-
most appropriate?
All the bases for the Fallout ones are like detailed bases with like stuff going on. So I kind of, it doesn't make sense to carry on down the sides like it would with these ones, because obviously these are just plain bases. So I've kind of, I would say I kind of accidentally done it, purely because as me and Ed have discussed before, I spend a long time on bases. I don't know why. I just like painting these things. And I just kind of think, oh yeah, I'll come back and do that later. And I've never done it.
I generally take a very deliberate approach to my base rim, but it's a very simple approach. Whatever color my terrain is on the base rim gets a single solid coat of that.
Yeah.
Well, two thin coats, but a single color. There's no
solid.
There's no highlight. There's no texture on it, and so I end up with, for example, on a muddy woodland base, I get all of this brown texture with rocks and highlights, but then the actual base rim is just a plain brown. It helps for the model to blend into the scenery when it's on the gaming table, whereas I think a black base rim really pops up and shows, hey, this is a game piece. And it kind of,
I think in my mind, maybe other people's minds work differently, but in my mind, I'm not imagining that base to be there at all. You know?
Yeah, that's sort of where I'm
playing
coming
a tabletop
from as well.
game, to a certain extent, there's a lot about your imagination. And I think it compares nicely to, like, when you look back at computer games from when we were at school. You look back at those old PlayStation 1 games. In my head, that game looked, stunning. You look at it now and you think, wow, that was terrible. But your imagination filled in a lot of the gaps, and I think that's the same with tabletop.
I have to mention Deus Ex. And every time you mention Deus Ex, someone will go off to install and play Deus Ex. And they were like, I love Deus Ex from the olden days. It's one of the greatest games. And then they go and play it, and it's like, wow, this is the worst graphics game of all time.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing. I think your brain fills in a lot of the missing details, and
for me, the black base rim kind of, it's too stark. Like, there's almost never any pure black on a model, so why should there be pure black on the or in the terrain? So why is there this like pure black divide between the model and the terrain? However, for display models, a nice crispy black base rim to like elevate the model onto like almost visually putting it on a plinth just by having a black base rim, that looks good. And so I don't want to say never paint your models with a black base rim. What I say is that you shouldn't always paint your models with a black base rim.
Yeah, I think on the grand scheme of things, it's not something I care about. If I turn up to a game and the other player's got rainbow coloured base rims, it ain't gonna bother me.
Oh, that's an idea.
I mean, like, I did the Sisters with the gold bases just because it fit the aesthetic in my head. The Sisters of Battle are very, it's over the top army, even for Warhammer. It, like, over the top, very religious, zealous, floating pulpits and cherubs and things.
It is quite ridiculous.
It fits the ornate kind of silliness to me.
Yeah, agreed. So I think my ultimate conclusion, and this is something I've said before, is that paint the base rim, paint it whatever colour you think is right. Stop forcing other people to paint the base rim black. That's the takeaway. Stop forcing other people to do things the way you want it them done.
I mean, I think it comes back to like when we've discussed before, like certain people don't want to play with people if they haven't painted the models and stuff like that.
It's like so snobby and elitist.
The game's a story, and it helps. The illusion he wants to play. He says, I'm not rude about it. I'd rather play with someone who's painted the models. And that's the only person I've ever spoken to that's kind of at least had some kind of explanation.
If you refuse to play someone because their army isn't painted, that is rude, regardless of how you say it. The fact that you've made that decision and said that's elitist, and that is rude.
I've never been to an actual public game. To be honest with you, I don't really fancy it.
I did used to play at a Games Workshop somewhat regularly, maybe once a month. Maybe that's not that regularly. But I remember liking painting back then, so I was never in the position where I was trying to play with a large unpainted army.
Yeah, from my point of view, I would think it would be like, say, a new player, and they've only painted 10% of the models they've bought, something like that. So
Yeah, I even someone who's been playing for a while, if they like the gaming side of things but they don't like the painting side of things, that's fine.
Yeah. Well, let me propose a follow-up question then.
Okay.
What if, let's take Games Workshop for example, just as an example. Should they sell pre-painted models?
Should I be able for that?
Yeah. Should I be able to go in and buy this Primaris Reaver pre-painted if I don't want to paint it?
I think there is genuinely a market for that. I think that there should be no shame or shade put on anyone who buys that kind of model, because I know that's as soon as that happens, there's going to be people saying, "Oh, you got the pre-painted ones. That's rubbish. That's no, stop that." I think it's absolutely legitimate for someone to buy pre-painted models from either Games Workshop or some other company, or having them painted for them by a commission painter.
Yeah, I mean, you look on Etsy, there's some really nice stuff that people do, but I just think it's very expensive. And if we
commission painting is very expensive, yes, because you're paying someone for 3 or 4 hours per model.
So, as I mentioned, this was already pre-painted. It came with the loot crate as a model. Have we got any?
Well, it was sprayed silver.
It was sprayed silver. It had a dry brush. So this is a Mylark model that came. So that's pre-painted. I personally would rather repaint it, but that is more than good enough.
Yeah, absolutely. For taking to the gaming table with a painted model specifically, even if it comes pre-painted, you know how action figures and things are painted kind of with a spray machine. It plugs the model into a mask, like a plastic form that masks the model, and it goes sprays over, and then it puts the next model in.
Yeah, you do one colour and then it goes into another mould and does the next colour. Yeah. But that to me shouldn't be that expensive. Like, if I'm buying,
if it's mass production, an assembly line of painting, that's not that expensive. Like I say, those action figures that are sold for £2 or £3 each, and they have pre-painted, and they have 5 or 6 colours on them.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be massively over the top. I'm just like, I'm imagining now in my head, like, you could buy the same set of Space Marines and you could have them, ultramarine blue. It's got to be, or like a red one, or just base colours, and then go, okay, you're buying the red one, so these are the decals. Is that how you say decal? decals for, world eaters. They're red, aren't they? I don't know. That'll be something for the auto redactors.
Beakies. Who
Beakies.
cares?
But exactly, I think that would work quite well for people. And again, if it's something, it's intimidating. Like I'm interested. Like I remember as a kid, like walking past the Warhammer shop, and you go, oh look, those are really cool. But then when you see, oh yeah, it's all grey plastic, the idea of painting it to me was intimidating.
It's unassembled and it's unpainted, and you have to do all of that yourself. For someone who wants to play the game, they shouldn't have to paint it. That is something that I genuinely believe. Yeah, I think that for playing the game and the model making and model painting should be separate. You can absolutely do both, and most people do both, and that's fine, but you shouldn't have to do both. Forcing someone to have to do both is just forcing people out of the hobby.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. I mean, you don't actually see a lot of pre-painted models, do you?
The most common ones that I know of is there's a few companies doing D&D pre-painted models.
Okay.
And it somewhat makes sense for a D&D player to go to a shop or a website or whatever and pick out the one model that represents their character and buy just that pre-painted.
See, I think if it was the model that represents me, I'd want to paint it myself. But if it was for, if you're DMing and you just want, I want some skeletons this week. Yeah, pre-painted skeleton. You might not use them again for 6 weeks.
Well, my point about a player buying it for themselves is that might be the only model they ever want. They don't want to have to buy a £3 model and a £15 starter paint set and all of the other bits to go for it.
That's a good point.
They just want to buy the one model that's pre-painted, and they don't mind spending £5 or £10 because it's the only money they're ever going to spend on it. And there's no extra effort in that. They don't want to have to learn how to paint. There are people posting videos, like there's a few YouTubers of like, this is this person's first ever model, but how long did it take you to teach them how to do that? There's a lot of effort, there's a lot of input into that. And yes, it is a good hobby and it is enjoyed by a lot of people, and you should help people into the hobby. But for someone who's not interested in that side of the hobby, don't force them to be. Yeah, Let them have a pre-painted model.
I'm thinking back now. See, back when I was at secondary school, I bought a set of orcs, fantasy orcs. I had enough money to buy that box of orcs and one pot of snot green.
Yeah.
So I didn't really follow through with the hobby because I just didn't have the money. I think if I'd have been able to buy a pre-painted set,
instead of buying that box of 10 orcs and one paint, if you'd have bought 5 orcs that were pre-painted,
or pre-painted bought not glued together to a certain extent, so you can posable at least a little bit.
In terms of marketing, in terms of like thinking about what would actually sell, I would expect that if you're going to sell them pre-painted, you would also sell them pre-assembled.
Pre-posed, yeah.
However, once someone has bought their 5 pre-painted Space Marines and they kind of think, I want to have a go at this, I've played my little skirmish game, I want to have a go at the modelling side of things, it lets them do that, kind of like with your orcs. It lets them kind of take things bit by bit rather than having to jump in at the deep end of buying lots of models, buying a pack of paints, learning how to paint and assemble and doing everything. Before you even get to play the game, you've expended 10, 20, 30 hours of your life and however much money, and you haven't got to play the game yet.
Yeah, I mean, like, I know Games Workshop do, like, if you're new, you can go in, they'll sell you a model there and then, and they'll sit and go through the painting with you.
Yes. The basic first steps is something that they'll happily teach, and that's a good thing. That's a valuable thing for the community.
So I assume they're not charging you for the paint in that particular instance. You're you're going to be doing like one model out of the box, and they're just going to have.
Do you use the store's paint?
I don't know. I'm assuming you would.
I don't
There's not
know.
much point in them teaching you how to paint if they're not going to give you any paint. As I've mentioned previously, I've never been in an official Games Workshop shop.
I have many, many years ago. I've not been in the last 15, 20 years, so I don't know how it is now.
Yeah, I mean,
it may well have changed.
The biggest one I've been to is Element Games up in Manchester. That was really cool because they've got like a gaming table, arena-y thing, and a shop, and they have people there's people at the side painting. Every time you go in, there's always like a guy there with his airbrush painting. I don't know if they're commission painters or they're just people are just hanging out there doing their painting. I don't know, but
there is something to be said for even though painting can be a very solitary thing, particularly in the last year, but there is something to be said for doing that while also being around other people doing the same thing. It's something I kind of really want to get into is painting my model while I'm sitting at a table with maybe you, maybe some other people who are also painting their own models.
I think it's valuable because you pick up stuff up from each other.
Even not from from a technical side, it's more social as well. And like you say, picking up ideas from each other, but also just, hey, the weather, hey, did you hear about the sports on the weekend? They certainly outsported the other team.
Yeah.
I know all about.
Display.
It's a game of two halves. It's a game of three quarters. 3/16? Who cares? The only sport that I'm interested in is airsoft. But to drag this conversation kicking and screaming from our little sidetrack there, that had nothing to do with Mini. I'll jump cut to the point where I say, so let's drag the conversation kicking and screaming away from our tangent and back to the conversation at hand by saying the next topic for our discussion should be model scales or model kits for kit bashing, terrain, model kit bashing, civilian vehicles as well, particularly is something I found interesting, but proxy models as well, maybe, depending on what it is you're looking at. We have a little model, but how little is it? And there are three different ways of defining that. But none of them match up to each other. None of them are really easy to directly compare. Particularly real scale and hero scale. For example, 1:48 scale is a true scale because everything is scaled by exactly the same amount. Everything is scaled by 1:48 times the original size, and so it is true scale because it's truly the scale of the original thing.
Yeah, proportions are correct on the people and stuff like that. Yeah.
28mm hero scale is not a true scale, and if you look at the particularly Games Workshop stuff from the early 2000s, kind of 3rd edition, 4th edition 40k, you'll notice that the Catachan models, their shoulders are enormous. Their wrists are bigger than most people's heads. They are way out of proportion, and they're it's called heroic scale because they look heroic. They have big features that's easier to paint, and it's easier to see those features when it's on the gaming table.
Yeah.
But if you put a 1:48 scale human model and a 28mm hero scale model together, they'll be roughly the same height. I think a 1:48 person would be a little bit taller, but not by much. But the hero scale person will probably have 3 times as much plastic in it, because everything's over accentuated. So when you want to buy a model kit, like a plane or a tank or a civilian vehicle, just a car or a van, to make some other model for your wargaming, what model scale do you go for?
If it's me, I sit and look at Wikipedia. So I think it's quite interesting. I jump in here on back again to the Fallout stuff I've been working on. is a 32mm heroic. The game's sort of set in an alternative timeline where all the vehicles are like 1950s American. Particularly the American users on the groups are picking up like 1950s, what they call Tonka toys, like little metal cars that look perfect.
I guess that's the equivalent of Matchbox and
that kind of thing.
Hot Wheels is the other one. Yeah, but
there's a lot of discussion about which is the correct scale to get to sort of match up with these models, because some of them they're a wee bit too small or a wee bit too big.
The unfortunate answer is that none of them are.
No,
because you're trying to match a true scale model to a hero scale model, and you will never get the right answer. What you have to do in that situation is kind of just pick one and go for it, and then accept that it's going to be slightly off.
Most people go with 148, but
yeah, I would generally say that if you're making a civilian vehicle, or if you're trying to replicate a realistic look for a 32mm hero scale model, 1:48 scale true scale vehicles look pretty good.
Yeah. I think some of the people was like 1:52, 1:53. I think came up. Can't remember.
However, I'm going to have to find them and throw a picture in here. I have a 1:48 scale, some World War II weaponry. So I've got a bolt action rifle from that's in 1:48 scale. In comparison to a hero scale lasgun, the entire like long rifle, well, kind of universal short rifle, but in comparison to modern weapons, it's really long rifle, bolt action thing. It's so spindly and thin in comparison to the lasgun, which is this massive chunky thing.
Yes, yeah.
However, if you then go up to, say, 1:35 scale for the weapon, it's now, maybe it's chunky enough, but it's now far too long. And so I have never been able to find weaponry or like certain bits of kit that you put on a person model that looks right in any scale. Vehicles, I can just about accept that 1:48 scale is a nice civilian vehicle, normal, realistic size. But then, of course, a lot of the stuff, particularly in 40k, as that's the biggest company in the community, a lot of the vehicles in 40k are also hero scale. The vehicles themselves are huge. And so when you have the wheel from a vehicle like an Orc truck or some of the bikes or whatever, in comparison to the wheel of a 1:48 scale true scale vehicle, it's absurdly different in size. And so I would actually say, and I've seen some people do this, 1:35 scale vehicles fit better in terms of size to the military over the top kind of hero scale vehicles that you get in the grimdark of the 40,000 universe.
I've got a hero scale toilet.
How many toilets have you got now?
Got 2. How many the ones I've printed, loads. These came in a. These are bought ones.
So you've been printing toilets and then also buying them. Can you not print them fast enough?
It came in a set of.
It came in a set of toilets. How many toilets are in this set?
The set that I bought, just these 2. But the set I bought was all different pieces of furniture, all resin, by TT Combat. Do you know when I was looking for sinks? I don't know if we mentioned this on the channel. I think we have.
Yeah, I remember the discussion about sinks.
Someone says, there's this set that TT Combat sell. I think they must have stopped selling them because I could only find one in the whole of the UK. So I bought that set and those 2 toilets were in it. They're nice though, because like one of them, like the cistern's got like a grenade in it, in the top, and then the cistern covers are separate and stuff like that. So those are going in Little Hut. Just get Little Hut mentioning.
Yay, Little Hut.
Yeah, Little Hut's getting those.
Little Hut and the Back to the Brush Stomper are going to be recurring themes, I think.
Well, there's 3 Little Huts now.
You're gonna now have to put some graffiti, like some BTTB graffiti, on the outside of Little Hut.
Oh god, I couldn't do that kind of quality painting. No way.
Graffiti
Not
painting.
free. I'm not very good at freehand.
Well, this is the perfect... Graffiti is the perfect way to learn freehanding. Because if you get it wrong, it sort of doesn't matter. Because graffiti has... Like, go and look at real graffiti. It has a wide range from genuinely brilliant artwork to absolute rubbish. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be good, because it can sit at that bad end of graffiti with no problem at all.
I printed a little a pool table for one of the little huts. I've printed a couple of chairs for the other, and then the third one on Thingiverse, someone released some Fallout inspired, and it's a sofa with a skeleton in it. Like, looks like he's just died sat in the chair. And there's a bed as well with like a couple of skeletons in that were really cool, kind of cartoony, but look brilliant. They'll fit the aesthetic.
As morbid as it is, and warning for those listening, the next few minutes of the conversation will be a little bit morbid. That gives you the option of doing a lot of texture painting, not physical texture, but painting in the texture when it comes to how material looks when a body has decayed on it. And there's documentaries and things and all sorts of stuff where this kind of stuff is studied or displayed. And there was a recent discussion on one of the other Discord groups that I'm in. Can't remember which one. I'll have to go and find it. But someone had painted like a banshee model with blood coming out of their eyes and over the dress. And they just painted it with bright red paint as a streak, as just two stripes all the way down it.
Well, yeah, rather than brown.
Blood over skin and blood over the white fabric doesn't look like that. And no. Like you say, you should be painting in browns, but it's not just a case of painting in brown. There's other things as well. And so something I want to do, and this is almost a video idea, is that looking at reference pictures and stuff of bloodstains over the course of many hours to see how they change.
Yes.
Because a fresh bloodstain will be bright red on white material, but then after 4 hours, 6 hours, 2 days, it's going to look different.
Yeah, it is browner. Because dry blood. When you get it on clothes yourself, been to enough airsoft games, it goes brown.
I think this is genuinely how far into the painting hobby I've got, because I used to paint just like, what color is this model? Well, the trousers are brown, the shirt is black.
Of course, the trousers are brown. It's Ed Scar paint.
The metalwork is going to be black with a silver dry brush, and that's it. That's as far as I went. Now, with the ability to just go on YouTube and find a specific tutorial, I can learn one specific thing and practice that one thing. So learning about highlights, learning about how to place highlights, and how to go into non-metallic metal for the highlights, and going into then textures. That's where I am now. I'm trying to learn textures, painting in textures, not physical textures.
Talking about textures, there's the rug. So as I mentioned in the last episode, I wanted to put some rugs in my doll's house, as Ed calls them. So way back when I was at Ed's house, he'd 3D printed, as he's just shown there, a little model rug.
Yeah, this is one of the Thingiverse. I printed it out and I put it on my pile of stuff to paint, and I never got around to it until last month.
Yeah. So I've printed one of those since. I did mine in resin. I lost a little bit of the tassels, but not as much as I did when I tried it on FDM.
Mine came out pretty good on FDM. The only problem is
the warping. Yeah.
Because it's so thin, if it gets even remotely warm, it will curl up.
Yeah, so that's I think an interesting one for the texture. Right, just pause for a second.
I'm not pausing while you're dragging the cat out of the way.
So yeah. So as I say, I've printed one of these up in resin now. So that's going to be one of the areas I'm going to be interested in this coming week, is looking at textures and painting that. Because I mean, the obvious thing to do would be to just print, 2D print on paper, and then have I got any? I've normally got some in here, but I haven't today, sadly. Like the posters I've been doing, I just print those on a laser printer, cut them out, stick a bit of brown wash on them, and then when they're dry after a day, I just PVA-ing those onto the back walls of the models.
Yeah,
so, I mean,
that's absolutely legitimate.
The obvious thing to do for carpet would be the same thing, but it sounds like a fun thing to try and do, is these carpets.
There's one of the model making, like terrain building YouTubers who's been using that same technique quite a bit recently. Wylock's Armories. They are doing a D&D one-shot campaign that's really, really rules heavy, and it's got all of the rooms like listed out with descriptions of the rooms.
Cool.
And so he's recreating each room as a terrain piece, or multiple terrain pieces in some cases. And sometimes he looks at the description and it says that the wall has a particular pattern on it, and it's far easier and quicker to find an appropriate image, scale it, print it, glue it into place, than it is to freehand for several hours that same result. I would probably go for freehanding because, as I've mentioned several times, I quite like mini painting.
I think it comes down to...
I don't get to freehand very much.
It comes down to mass. Like in that instance, if you're building loads and loads of rooms, and like you say, it's a one shot, is it worth it?
Absolutely, yeah, I know what you mean.
Like the again for my Novak model, the fences. So I primed all those in black. I then did a very heavy dry brush in silver, and then I did another dry brush with brown, and that's all I've done, because there's like 20 pieces of fence panels there. I'll show you my I did a couple of billboards. If we remember, I'll show those next month. I've done a couple of billboards for the Fallout tabletop. What I ended up doing was printing the billboards, priming in a flat grey, and then spraying a silver spray paint over, but not heavily. And then that got basically the cheapo paint I bought off Amazon that I watered down, did that brown, and that looks really good.
I was trying to find some of the craft paint in brown recently. The Poundland near me, I go in there every now and again, less so in the last year, but I used to go in there fairly regularly, and they always used to have the
School
selection
paint.
of 6 craft
School
paints.
paint, yes.
And it was 500 millilitres for £1, which is amazing value, but they're craft paints. They have great big pigment. No good for painting minis. For terrain, pretty good. Yeah. And so they had the 6 colours. So it's red, yellow, blue, primary colours for paint. And then black, white, and brown for the monochrome and the middle of the colour wheel. And I never bought a brown. In fact, the only colour I ever bought was black to make a black wash for terrain.
Yeah, I mean,
and I never bought a brown.
But look at this. This is poster paint brown. Admittedly, there's 2 more layers of different brands on top of it now, but the actual base over the black is just poster paint brown that I bought off Amazon cheap.
Yeah,
but not Poundland cheap, sadly.
Yeah, I've seen some on Amazon for like £6 or £7 for a 500 ml.
Yeah, see, I was doing that. I was looking for, like, the biggish bottles like that. I was thinking, brown, ideal, but they're really expensive.
What's the proportion of paint that you use in a wash? I think it's 1/4, isn't it? So if you get
I
half
don't even use that much.
But so you're talking about at least 2 litres of wash that you're getting out of a half-litre bottle of paint, if not
bearing in
more
mind I'm
than
using this as primarily to paint all this wooden MDF kits. Because it just absorbs
that stuff
paint.
soaks up paint no end.
I tried, obviously I primed them all in black and then tried painting them. It still soaks it up. I tried clear coating after I primed it. Still makes no difference.
Did that not make a... Wow, okay. Did you use matte varnish or a matte clear coat?
In fact,
or
this is the thing I
gloss
did
clear
it on.
coat?
This is the model I did it on. It made absolutely no difference.
Interesting.
That's the silver spray paint, by the way.
That is a good thing to know, actually, that using clear coats on the MDF doesn't actually help with the layers.
I'm tempted.
Unfortunate.
I'm tempted to try the old watered down PVA.
To seal it. Yeah. Maybe that'll work.
So what I did do, and I still haven't got around to it, is I've kept the bits of off-cut wood. I'm going to say sprue. I know sprue's not the right word, but people at least know what I'm talking about. I kept the sprues. So I'm going to try different things and see if I can work it out.
I have to point out that what most people call sprues aren't actually sprue.
I knew that'd annoy him.
Actually, technically, just to kind of point it out, here is a piece of plastic frame. Just a little offcut that I happen to have on my desk. And this part here, the kind of where it narrows, that is the sprue. Because the sprue is the channel that plastic runs through. You could argue that plastic runs through the entire frame, therefore it's all sprue. But technically, it's only there, like the frame is there to hold all the parts together.
Yeah.
It's this part here that it has the plastic go through it into the model. So actually, technically, it doesn't matter and the whole thing's a sprue. Just call it a sprue, it's fine.
Incidentally, little huts, they all came with these little wooden tables, and I've got absolutely no idea what I'm going to do with them, but they're so cute.
Can I have one of them? Because I want to make... I have a parody video, and I'm going to auto redactus this conversation. Well, I think those were the big topics that we had to talk about. I think we've skipped over one of them, but that's fine because we've got
kind of
next
merged
month.
into what we were talking about. Anyway.
Yeah, we sort of talked about it and other things as well. So, thank you very much to everyone who managed to get this far, which, according to my statistics, is one person. If you managed to get this far, post in the comments section below, what is your favourite colour for a base rim?
Sky blue pink.
Sky blue pink.
Mm-hmm.
Blue pink?
Yeah.
Sky blue or pink? Sky pink.
Blue pink.
Sky blue pink. What's sky blue pink?
Exactly.
What's in between pink and sky blue? Well, both of them have white mixed in, so let's just call it red and blue. So it's purple. So it's like a white purple, which would be mauve.
Zerus purple.
Is
that's beautiful purple.
Purple and mauve, and I don't get to paint enough purple. I wish I could paint purple more often.
It's because Ed's primarily an orc player, so
paint them purple and they disappear and you can't see them anymore. So, thank you very much for watching. If you would like to check out any of the pictures that we would use during the episode, kind of have a closer look at some of the stuff we've been talking about, we have an Instagram account, link in the description, and the top 10 images will be over there.
If you've spotted anything where we've been inaccurate or slightly wrong, please let us know anything, and we'll try and mention it in the order redactus. I think we've done plenty of rambling this month, so I think we'll have some for next month.
Plenty has gone wrong. Yes.
He's been Ed Scar, and I'm Paul Allen, and we'll see you next time on Back to the Brush.
Bye bye.
Ding! Orb. Did you see that? There was an orb.
Are you a ghost?
It was a piece of dust in the air. I just like
Are you
pointing them
sure you're not? Are you sure you're not a ghost? He might be a
out.
ghost.
I could be a ghost. Could be a ghost. Feel like one.
Could be.
This is for all our dedicated viewers, and I'm assuming this is going at the end of the video. This is 1 week of me having no sugar, so I've switched to like Pepsi Max and Iron Brew without sugar.
I have switched to Freeway Cola.
I am permanently tired. I always thought that it was the caffeine that kept me going, but it clearly wasn't. It was the sugar. It is crazy.